So as we step into the Joseph story, I wonder how many times, as we open up our scriptures to Genesis chapter 41, Genesis chapter 41, verse 1 is a verse that has been very meaningful to me from the very beginning of my journey into missions. Verse 1, it says, "Now it happened at the end of 2 full years, and the Lord brought me to a stop in the reading of the scriptures at the beginning of my journey. Because there are times when the 2 full years is filled with silence. Where is God? I am trying my best to look up to heaven and hear the living God and to walk with the living God and see God, but I can't seem to see him. And at times I can't, it just seems like the veil between heaven and earth is too thick. It's like the veil is there and the curtain is closed and it is not open. And I am on this side of the great divide. At the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh had a dream, and behold, he was standing by the Nile. The Nile, where is the Nile? It's in, can we hear it? It's in Africa.
It starts in Kenya.
It's up there in Egypt, we think, in the Goshen, but it flows, if you follow the river, the longest in the world. It flows down all through East Africa, and it goes through at least 9 or more nations. It goes through Ethiopia, all the way down to the source of the Nile, and the source of the Nile is still being researched, and it depends on when it rains, because you have all these tributaries that flow into it. And so, as they're in, and of course, you know, we have Lake Victoria, and I have stood just a few months ago, stood on the shores of Lake Victoria, on a little piece of ground called Rusinga Island. And as you can hear those words, island, it means it's jutted out into the middle of the, well, it's not in the middle because there are many islands, and it sits on the shores of the grand Lake Victoria, which is fed by the other nations, Uganda, Tanzania, other nations all flowing in to flow this longest river in the world. And so our biblical geography, if we open up our eyes to maps, and so I have placed in your hands a whole series of maps and pages and stuff that is too much for today in 20 minutes, but we will cover the overview so that in time you can let it soak deep into it as you see the pictures. And I love pictures, and I'm a very visual person, and so I'm giving you some of my best pictures for you to take a look at today. Genesis 41, and the story of the God of silence and the God in the land of the Nile flowing from south to north is an incredible story, and it is so huge. And for so long, I had also wondered about biblical, like, why is the scriptures written this way? And and on a whole nother day, on another next class, we could spend a whole hour just on the subject of biblical structure. But the biblical structure, just real quick, what's the size of creation in Genesis? How many chapters? 1. Come on here now. Couldn't we have a little more up here and a little less down there? But what is the shape of things in Egypt? Pyramids. So what is this shape here? This is the story of the expansive God, the God who is on the move. And the story of God starts small, but it gets big and bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's so wide and it's so big and it's so universal in scope. It takes the whole of the scriptures to explain it. And that's why this on one page is a story of the whole of the scriptures from Genesis to Revelation on one page. And as we go through progressively the covenants, you see that the covenants don't destroy one another, but actually they build on one another, and they keep getting more and more detailed and more expansive in the whole, including more and more details of the story, including thousands of things that all then begin to come into the pieces, just like a humongous pyramid of all the bricks and boulders together. I have stood and been at the pyramids, and the height of the boulders go right here. They line up to the heart. The story begins, let's go to Genesis chapter 37, because this is the beginning of the Joseph story. Genesis, each of the stories keep getting bigger. The Noah goes, Bulus, yes, good to see you. You've come at a beautiful time. We would not want to tell this story without you. We are so happy to have you. Thank you. Good to see you, dear brother. Good to see you. Thank you. It's coming at a wonderful time.
Oh, I feel special.
You are. You are an honored guest. We in this story of Joseph, the story includes like chapters 37 through 50. So this is the biggest story in the whole of the book, but it is just like this pyramid. It's just like, it starts small with creation, and each of the, the creation and the story of humanity and the fall and sin, and then Noah. How big is Noah? It's chapters 6 through 9. And then you go into Abraham and his story, and then you get into Jacob, but it then all leads into the Joseph story, which is huge, and it's connected right here in chapter 37. It goes all the way through 50. It's huge. It says, now Jacob lived in the land where his father had sojourned, in the land of Canaan. These are the records of the generations of Jacob. Let's say it together now. Joseph. Jacob, Joseph. So we see the connect between Jacob and his story and Joseph, this story. And now this is the nexus point that now is going to break open the whole of the rest of the book of Genesis, all the way from chapter 37 through 50. And the position of it is so huge, because as we look at the name Joseph, and we don't have time to go into all the details of all of the names are very significant in the scriptures, and Joseph is connected with other brothers. His name is the promise that there will be another to come. So he carries the name that his story is not his alone, but is rather connected with his brother. And so his longing of his life is that somehow he's connected with this other brother that is supposed to come to complete his story. And his story is empty without that brother. And so his story is started. And what is the name of his brother? As you know it as Benjamin. But when Benjamin was born, it was his mother Rachel that was giving birth on the borders of Bethlehem. Where was Jesus born? Bethlehem, the one that takes the fallen stories and moves it on. In other words, the Messiah has to come out of Bethlehem, because there the story had stopped with Jesus coming into the world. And so now the story of God is moving on because the Messiah has come. But Benjamin is born there, but his name is not Benjamin, because Rachel is giving birth, and Rachel's story is connected with her sister Leah, and we can spend whole hours on that story. But we have the Rachel story, which is connected to Leah, and then as Rachel is giving birth, she is in her dying gasps, bleeding to death, and she gives birth to this son, and she gets to hear that, yes, there has been another son that has been born. And she calls him Benoni, son of my sorrows, and dies. But that's not the ending of the story. The whole message is on the tears of Rachel, and that's a beautiful story. But as she gets to glory, she suddenly realizes that the son that she thought was dead, her first son, is not up in glory somewhere, but is back on earth fulfilling promises. And so her tears are immediately dried as she arrives in heaven. What? My son Joseph is not dead? Where is he? What is he? And she gets to watch the whole next of the story of Joseph break open as her tears are dried in heaven. It begins here in chapter 37, this story of Joseph, when he was 17 years of age, pastoring the flock with his brothers while he was still a youth, along with the sons of Bilhah, sons of Zilpah, and the father's wives. And we have here this story that is connected with the whole of it, and yet I have been so surprised as we study this name Joseph, the one connected with an empty brother lost somewhere, that his name finally appears also in the rest of the scriptures, and it is also in the book of Revelation. Revelation chapter 7, we often run to verses 9 and 10 in Revelation 7, the multitude of peoples that no one can count from all nations. But as we back up in the text, we realize that the 12 tribes once again are mentioned in the text of Revelation 7. Joseph is there in the book of Revelation. What is he doing in the book of Revelation? The 12 tribes and their diaspora is now concluded. And because of the diaspora, the kingdom has come in its totality. It is fulfilling a diaspora promise. So as Joseph is connected with Jacob, and he is connected with the whole of the scriptures, Genesis to Revelation, the story of Joseph is the story of the diaspora God, who is, in the grand conclusion, we'll hear it and you already know it, the God who is on the move. I want us to come over to this here, this side here, and I've written the title, The Great Divide. And as we've moved from page 1, I want us now to go to page 2 in your notes, and I want us to look at geography. And the story of the God in Genesis 1, the Elohim, and it's like a plumb line as you go through Genesis. Think of Genesis like this gigantic pyramid. Stories keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but there is a plumb line in the story. And the plumb line falls down and it connects the Genesis 1, the first phrase of the Bible, Bereshit bara Elohim, Elohim, the many as one. What kind of God is this? A dance of love. The God of love, the dance of love, the many as one, he calls his people. And Genesis 28 is connected with Genesis 48, and it's the words that were fulfilled, there was first promise at the story of Jacob, because Jacob goes to get his wife, and as he is taking off to go get his wife, Isaac prophesies over him, you shall become Lichal Amim. What a strange promise to hear, because he's going to get his wife, and if he goes to get a wife just like himself, then we have one ethnicity. But the word is Amim, many peoples together. You shall become a mixed family of ethnicities altogether. He calls the place Bethel, the house of God. Isaiah repeats the words, Isaiah 56, my house shall be a house of prayer, Lichal Amim, for all peoples, many peoples all together. This is who our God is. The God who is collectively bringing us together to be a family of faith of many different cultures and peoples and nations all together. This is in Genesis 1, right in the first book, 28 and 48. This is a diaspora story that engages with the whole. Engages with the whole. Where is Egypt in reference to Canaan? And what is Canaan connected with Ur? Ur, down to Canaan, today Jerusalem, and then where does it go? Over here. What is the invisible line here? Because there is a piece of earth that connects this to that. What is this? Asia. Where is this?
Africa.
Africa. In the whole of the world, there is only one piece of land that connects Asia to Africa, and it is the Canaan piece of Israel as you walk from the one to the other. It's a bridge. The story of the scriptures lands at the bridge, the landing, the uniting of our whole world together. And it's open to the oceans of the world. You can get the Mediterranean on the one and go all the way out to the Gibraltar Strait. The Gibraltar Strait is a strait. It's not a bridge. And Africa and Europe is still separated there unless you get in a boat. On the other side, you can take the waters, go to the Indian Ocean, and that's why we have the diaspora stuff from Africa all the way to India, and India to Africa, because you can get on a boat and go from one another. But the land bridge is across the Great Divide, because this is the place where God wants to work. This one sheet here is the Elohim Plumline Amim. Can you say those two words with me? Elohim, that's the God of many as one. That's literally in the Hebrew what it's saying. And then in the Hebrew, the promise was given to Jacob that he would become an Amim. Elohim, say it with me now, Amim. And when does it happen? Well, you have to read the whole rest of the story, and that's why we're in a hurry to get to the rest of the story. But it promises fulfilled in chapter 48. So remember the infinity, the 8 eights in there. It is fulfilled in chapter 48 when we read, "Now the Lord who appeared to me at Lux, the place where heaven opened and the angels are ascending and ascending, that I called that place Bethel, the house of God. Now the Lord is fulfilling his promise when he sees his African-born grandsons that were born to him to Asenath." In the story of and it appears in chapter 41 and 46, Asenath is repeated, and the names of Ephraim and Manasseh are connected to flowering and forgetting. I've forgotten my troubles, and now I am flowering and blessing. This is the blessing and flowering on this side of the Great Divide. Now, there's a couple of details in this story that we got to get to real quick, but I want us to look at this invisible line that separates. Last night yesterday we were standing in Chinatown, and there was this wall that was placed. It said, this from here is different than over there. And this story is the removing of the wall between the divides. We have here in chapter 37, let me get my notes a second here. Here we are. We're going to jump now to 39, chapter 39, verses 1 and 2. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, the Egyptian officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the bodyguard, brought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. The Lord was, say it with me, with Joseph. The Lord was with Joseph. We have it repeated once again numerous times in the text. We have it again in verse 9. It says, "There is no one greater in this house than I, and he has withheld nothing from me, because you are his wife. How then could I do this great evil and sin against God?" Verse 21. "But the Lord was with Joseph and extended kindness to him and gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer." Okay, we could spend hours as we're talking about the diaspora and the Great Divide. But the story is the God of Revelation, who is on this side of the Great Divide, on Africa's soil, is suddenly present. And so what this is the story of the diaspora God that engages with the whole of this story. But this is the story of inclusive love, of engaging love that includes Africa at its heart. And God is building a kingdom of priests But the image of the high priest is that he wears 12 tribes. And the tribe stones are different colors. But they are not one size bigger than another. They are the one sizes all together, held together close to the heart. We are a kingdom of priests that are carried Kadash Yahweh. Our minds are to be holy unto the Lord. And all of our vision and planning and engineering and sciences and mathematics and everything we can pump through this brain is meant to be holy unto God, including our thoughts of how we treat one another and the thoughts that we have one to another. Men and women, holy, holy, holy is our minds. That is a challenge for me. But our hearts are to be what? They're to be as big as the whole of the kingdom of God, which incorporates the 12 stones, each with its different color. And so the story of God here is an embracing love that is shaped like this, the shape of the cross, that brings in Africa into its heart. Ephraim and Manasseh. The sign of forgetfulness of sorrows and the sign of blessing. Because on this side of the divide is where, in the ending of the story, the whole of the nation comes and is formed on this side of the divide. The nation of Israel was born out of Africa to be a blessing to the whole of the world. It's a diaspora story that involves whole regions, but there's diaspora things of brokenness of brothers and sons that are reconciled. It's a father and a son who is separated. There's this invisible divide. But the ending of the story is when it's all brought together in this gigantic conclusion that is the paradigms that gives the shape to the foundation of the whole. It is the story of inclusive, engaging love. And sometimes I struggle with that word inclusive because we're using it in ways that I don't think should be all that inclusive. But the story of engaging love. And there is a diaspora goal. It's a vision of the whole. The whole of the world, the whole of the universe, a diaspora vision, the whole of the world. The God who finishes the diaspora with the story of the God on the move. Okay, we have just a couple of minutes and I want to zip through the handouts that you have been granted just to make sure that you have these in hand, and then we'll open it up for further questions as we come to a close. So first page was the vision of the whole beginning to end, and Joseph's story covers the whole of it. It's a huge story, but that's why it's big, because it is a big story that incorporates all of the rest of the stories within it and gets us all the way to the book of Revelation. It is the story of the nature of God, who is the God of love, because this is who our God is. God is constantly in move, but in move in relation. The Father loves the Son. He sends the Son. The Son obeys the Father, listens to the voice and the direction of the Father, but all things are then given over to the Son, that all should worship Him. It's an interrelationship of love. The Spirit leads Jesus out of the waters and goes into the desert for 40 days of fasting. This is death. This is death. Jesus, for me, died twice. He died at the beginning of His ministry and at the end as a rehearsal for the cross. This is the story of Jesus that listens to the voice of the Spirit and obeys the voice of the Spirit, but then He sends the Spirit. This is a perfect relationship between the Spirit and the Son. The Father creates the earth by sending the Spirit, and yet listens to the voice of the Spirit in the book of Romans, the gemidos do Espírito, the groanings of the Spirit. And so we have this like almost atomic, think of it as an atom. What is the dance of the atom? But the particles all flying together, the pieces, the protons, the electrons, and the neutrons, the spinning in the dance of this love, this dynamic dance. And so God puts in creation a symbol of who He is. Father, Son, Spirit, in this dynamic duo of Father, Son, Spirit in a certain sense diaspora, but in an active relation one with another. And then that comes into our creation, that we are to be the same. The proton is not overtaking the electron, but we're working together in this dance of love. And this is the call. This is the call. And so we have then in Genesis the Elohim that calls the Yamim. And so I put the pictures here for us to see it. I don't know exactly what Asenath looked like, but this, for me, the best that I can get to is this here. One of the queens, the queens of Africa, and she is a beauty, is she not? Woo! 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 I mean, she's a beauty. And yeah, yes. And so okay, so I gotta jump in real quick for Brazil, because you know where Brazil. Okay, now listen to this. Okay, Brazil is in the middle of the ocean as you're spreading out from the other side. We're on the islands, the gigantic islands out in the middle of the Pacific Atlantic Ocean, North and South America. Okay, well, Brazil, we don't have time to go into this, but Brazil, you know, if we got First Peoples, they're from Asia. The first DNA that's in Brazil is Asian. That's a diaspora. And then we got the largest exportation of slaves was taken to Brazil. We received 500,000 here, and there were many other 500,000 that had died along the way. But brothers and sisters, there were 5 million that were taken to Brazil. 10 times the number landed in Brazil and became a part of the ethos of the diaspora. We talk about diaspora stories from Africa to the world, straight across the ocean and fed into Brazil. So when I look at a lot of beautiful beauties from Brazil, I go, God is bringing us back to Eden. Bringing all the DNA all back together. And that's some beautiful, beautiful, beautiful things. So I, on my PowerPoint, which I don't have, I brought up a picture of a few Brazilian beauties, so maybe we should just leave that alone. Okay, forget that. Okay, we got to get done. Well, they're right here. God brought the PowerPoint here. Okay. We got some beauties here. Yeah, we're talking about you. We're talking about you.
I was telling her that my mom, my great grandmother, she was born a slave.
Which?
In Brazil. Yeah, wow. But that's what we're talking about.
Wow.
My great grandmother.
Wow. So Beatriz, today you represent for us a reconciliation of
Asia, Africa, and Europe.
Yeah.
Intersects in Brazil.
Yeah, all come back together. So when I think of Eden,
the Portuguese colony.
Yeah.
The Portuguese colony in all the way in East Asia, Malacca, Malaysia, and in India. So,
yeah.
Some of the food and agriculture have crossed Atlantic and the Indian Ocean.
Yeah. Okay. This sheet here, this page here, is one of my favorite shots. And look where Manasseh and Ephraim sit. I about fell out of my chair when I asked that question. I wonder where those African-born tribal sons went in the story of God. Where do they sit? Are they kind of like on the border, kind of on the edge while we let you in the door? Or are they not at the center of the land? Where is Jacob's well? The promise given that he will become Alikal Lamim, the many peoples together as one. Shechem, and right there, Jacob's well, and the well still exists today. You can visit it. And the bones of Joseph are buried there. They have a tomb called Joseph's tomb sitting there at Jacob's well, near Jacob's well.
That's a Samaritan story.
That's a Samaritan story. The diaspora. And so, what is the summary of the law? Love God with all your heart, but then love your neighbor. Love your neighbor as yourself. This is the story of God's inclusive love. And this is how we walk in the world as the priests of the kingdom, carrying all of the tribes together, including the African-born in the heart. Because the story is not completed. In fact, as we go through time, so the next pages come very quickly, and tuku pamoja, we got to do a little Swahili in here. Tuku pamoja. Pamoja is the Bible. Pamoja. It's in the Bible in Swahili. You can read it. I celebrated when I'm looking. Is pamoja here? There it is. Pamoja. How blessed it is when the brothers dwell together in unity. But then the prophets speak, and I don't have time to go into the prophetic promise of Zechariah and Zephaniah, but Jesus goes into Jerusalem, and it says that he will destroy the war horses and all the chariots of all the armies, but he himself will string his bow. He is announcing that he is the African warrior. I will string my bow with Jacob. And then he goes a phrase, he says, and then I will fill it. It's not an arrow, I will fill it with Ephraim, the African-born. I will fill it with Ephraim, the African-born sons. And he announces then that the African diaspora at some point is supposed to be the key of the kingdom that breaks open the finishing of the kingdom for the whole of the world. And so it's a prophetic announcement that is then fulfilled in the book of Revelation when Joseph is there. And once again, Manasseh is mentioned. And we can go into more details with the whole story. Okay, I am finishing. Amen. 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 So we have the whole of the story. On the finishing pages, I have listed for you a sample of over 1,000 references to Africa in the scriptures. The last 2 pages, I start giving just a short list of about, I haven't even counted them, but a short list of Africa in the scriptures and the finishing of the story of God, which is love out to the ends of the earth. Present these things before you with humility. This is a journey that I've been on for basically the whole of my life, and it keeps getting more and more interesting all the time. I've enjoyed traveling in these last couple of years with the Global Diaspora Network. Amazing things. I've appreciated so much to go to South Africa, and to stand on Table Mountain and to see the beauty there and the flowers, the proteas, the flowers that are so glorious. I thought I was in Eden. Just so glorious. Traveled to Egypt. I've been in Kenya several times. I've been in Rwanda. I was crying with the Rwandan brothers, but seeing the Hutu and the Tutsi coming together in the church together in reconciliation and love. And so these stories have been so enriching for me in just these last few years of journeying with the Global Diaspora. And I pray still for perhaps some years to come. God bless you all.